The three nations would try to get a jump on the KU and its allies. They would announce that the Discovery would leave to Duna within several weeks' time, but in reality, the plan was already underway.
Discovery to New Hope Station. Permission to undock. Roger that, Discovery. You're cleared to go. Quarter power only. Roger that.
On board the Discovery, there would only be 2 crew members in order to maximize life support, 1 pilot and 1 scientist. Not bringing an engineer was risky, but in order to make the mission as efficient as possible, it had to be done this way. 1 pilot to create maneuvers around Duna without the help of mission control, and 1 scientist to gather as much observational science around Duna as possible. If anything too complicated to fix were to break, they would perish. To say that the astronauts were scared was an understatement, but what made them heroes was the fact that they were willing to face their fears and tackle the mission at hand. The KU, in learning about the early launch of the Discovery, accelerated their plans. They would have 3 crew members on board, 1 pilot, 1 engineer, and 1 scientist. Although life support would have to be micromanaged in order to keep the crew alive for 3 years, it was doable. If push came to shove, the crew of the Horus would do anything to complete the mission, even going as far as sacrificing their lives, because failure was not an option. Now with the Horus close on their tail, the Discovery had no other choice but to stay as far ahead of them as possible. They were so far away from Kerbin now. No Kerbal in Kerbin history had ever been so far, and the scary part was, they were about to get a lot farther. Radio transmissions from Mission Control with news and updates about the mission poured in, as well as calls from family and friends just before the radios finally went silent. Thanks to the studies conducted on the International Space Station, as well as the studies gathered from the Minmus mission, scientists had found a way to combat the effects of zero-G on the Kerbal body. The Discovery would go into a spin. This would create artificial gravity through centrifugal force, allowing the astronauts to work in relative comfort, as long as they didn't look out the window. The URA had spent almost every dime it had on building the Discovery and then refitting it for interplanetary travel, and the KU and its allies were nearly broke from building the Horus. It would seem that Kerbin was at a standstill, with nothing interesting going on in orbit, but the Allied Mountain States had an ace up their sleeve. Deep in their territory was a secret launching facility that was built back in the day when the URA and the Allied Mountain States were racing for the moon. It was here that the Charon project was started. At first, it was a ship designed for war, but after the URA and the Allied Mountain States became allies, it was geared more towards exploration. The URA knew about the project, but didn't realize how close it was to completion. The Charon spacecraft was actually meant to travel alongside the Discovery in a type of joint fleet operation. But ever since the Discovery left for Duna, the Charon would now have to take its place in finishing the Minmus missions.
Permission to dock. Permission granted, Charon. Docking Bay 5. Welcome aboard. We are making good now. Здесь Нетофиев. As manual. Minmus orbit achieved. Preparing program for Minmus probe retrieval.
Everything was going well, almost perfect. But before they left, one of the Kerbin astronauts from the Allied Mountain States did something unusual and profound. While planting the AMS flag next to the probe on Minmus, they left on the plaque these words. Little did that astronaut realize how profound those words would become in the very near future. Finally, the science from the last Minmus probe had been collected. It was now time to return back to Kerbin. Hopefully, with the science gathered, scientists and engineers could make a better communications dish. This would allow them, in theory, to start talking again with the Discovery. However, the Charon didn't have a heat shield. Its way of re-entering Kerbin's atmosphere was through a type of heat-resistance aerobraking, a concept never really fully tested. The Allied Mountain States were convinced that it was going to work. However, the rest of the Allied nations weren't so sure. As the shuttle left the station, it carried with it a couple of the astronauts from the space station and the ship, eager to come home. However, during re-entry, there was a slight miscalculation in the guidance computer, and the shuttle ended up making an emergency landing in the middle of a schoolyard. One can only imagine how many little faces were pressed against the classroom window as a giant shuttle landed in the middle of their schoolyard. How many future astronauts were born that day? Only time will tell.